He didn't carry a weapon. He didn't need to. The scars on his face were older than most empires. They didn't know what to make of him at first. A single human, unarmored, unarmed, walking through the vaulting marble corridors of the Galactic Summit Hall as if he had every right to be there, as if his boots still remembered the mud of 100 battlefields and the blood beneath it. The Virelian guards watched him with unblinking chrome eyes. The Cetar diplomats hissed warnings across subspace, even the Archide Empress, towering and cold and plated in star-forged alloy, paused her breath when she saw him. He was human, and humanity, by all known records, was extinct. His name was Sergeant Cadethorn, battle-scarred, quiet, a relic no one saw coming, and he had come to speak. The year was 7,419 post-collapse. Earth had been dust for over a millennium. The last surviving colonies, the cradle remnants, had long since gone dark, their signals lost in the screaming wash of stellar radiation and wars not of their making. The Council of Conquered Dawn. Species ruled now, 5 to 7 species strong, bonded by treaties, trade, and the cold memory of war. They didn't remember humanity as people. They remembered them as incidents. The sundering of Kirofor, the Iron Front campaigns, the black snowfall on Trason Prime. Humanity hadn't fought for conquest. They had fought for survival, and when the end came, they didn't beg. They made sure no one would forget. But memory fades. Until Cadethorn walked into the summit alone. He didn't come in a warship. His shuttle was barely holding together, a patchwork vessel marked with faded insignia, the ancient double chevron of the Terran Marine Corps. He stepped out into the starlit promenade and walked like he belonged there. His armor was ceremonial, scorched and cracked. His left arm was cybernetic, a relic of the pre-breaker era, buzzing faintly with every motion. He said nothing until the guard stopped him. "Identify your species," one barked. Cade looked up. His eyes were pale blue, not from birth, but cryo-scarring, the kind that came from too many awakenings on too many forgotten battlefields. "Human," he said. The guard froze. "That species is classified as extinct," Cade finished. "For him." Then he stepped forward. The guard, inexplicably, stepped back. "I'm here under the compact of last words," Cade said, voice like gravel. Clause 42. "Any species may speak once, before final judgment is rendered on war." The Empress of Archives stirred. That clause has not been invoked in 3 millennia. Cade met her gaze. Then maybe it's overdue. The peace summit was not supposed to be complicated. The Drazati Empire had glassed the border moons belonging to the Drell Syndicate. The Council was prepared to formally vote for putative war. Clean, economic, profitable war. Cade's arrival derailed everything. Now every eye was on the human fossil standing alone at the speaker's circle. Every translator hummed to life. Every breath caught. He waited until it was silent enough to hear the stars whisper. "I'm not here to stop your war," Cade said. "I'm here to remind you what it costs." He placed a small metal cube on the pedestal before him. It flickered once, then projected a pale blue hologram. Earth, whole, spinning in silence. "Before you vote to burn another world, understand this. I was there when ours died." The projection shifted. Cities turned into fire, oceans boiling, the moon cracking, the sky shattering into ribbons of red dot. No music, no narration, just the sound of static and screams. This is what the last war looked like. Not the stories, not your clean simulations, the real thing. The projection changed again, to faces. Human soldiers, children, elders in bunkers, officers shouting orders through tears, lovers embracing on the edge of annihilation. Cade's voice never rose. "You've forgotten what we were. Not warriors, survivors." The room remained frozen, and what survived is me. Someone called for his arrest. Another for quarantine. Cade didn't move. They said we were extinct. They were wrong. He stepped down from the speaker's circle and walked slowly into the center of the council floor. "I'm not here to beg. I'm not here to threaten. I'm here because I remember. And that's enough to scare you." He turned toward the massive Drazati delegate, a creature of claws and obsidian armor. "You want to burn more worlds? Go ahead. But remember this." He tapped the cube once more. One last image, a field of ruined enemy ships orbiting a dead star. One word burned across the wreckage in human glyphs. "Remember us." The cube powered down. "I walked here alone," Cade said, voice softer now, "because the last time we came together, the galaxy bled for 1,000 years. And then he sat, a human, alone, in the middle of the galaxy's most powerful assembly. And no one dared speak. Asterisk, they called it peace, but every species had a knife behind its back. And now, they all turned to look at the last man who remembered the bleeding. The summit chamber remained silent. Kate Thorne sat in the center like a scar across polished marble, uninvited, unwanted. Unforgettable. Outside the great galactic station, the stars shifted across the viewport in slow, regal arcs. The council orbited no world, a neutral ground adrift in the void, dealt for diplomacy and veiled threats. Now it was holding its breath, and then the shouting began. Humanity has no right to speak, barked Councillor Vern, the Drazati representative. His voice rasped like razors drawn over steel. Their species breached every treaty ever offered. They engineered extinction weapons. They sowed collapse, and they paid for it. Came the calm voice of the archived Empress. She hadn't moved since Kate entered, but her eyes were locked on him, unblinking, ancient, intrigued. With their world, with their blood, it was not payment, his Vern. It was cleansing. Cade raised his head slowly. His fingers curled unconsciously round the faded insignia stitched into his left shoulder. The Terran eagle, wings cracked by fire. He didn't stand. He didn't need to. You speak of history, Cade said, low and steady, but you weren't. There, Vern bristled. And you were. I held the line at Vega 9. I carried children through the ash on Lareth Prime. I watched an orbital station full of refugees detonate, because we ran out of oxygen and hope at the same time. Cade stood now, and no one stopped him. We didn't want to win. We just didn't want to vanish. Outside the chamber, across the galactic network, systems began to tremble. Unbeknownst to the Council, the Drazati Empire had already deployed Stormfleet Vanguard, a mass of hyper-capable warships lying in wait at the edge of Drell space. It was supposed to be a show of force, a reminder that diplomacy was a courtesy, not a necessity. But something went wrong. The ships started to vanish, one by one. Without warning, without damage reports. Gone. Like whispers into a void. Inside the chamber, an aide rushed to Vern's side and whispered in panicked tones. The Drazati Councilor paled, his spines retracting instinctively. Cade saw it. He knew that look, the look of a predator who realized the dark hides something worse. What did you do? Vern snapped at Cade. I haven't lifted a finger, Cade replied. Yet, elsewhere, far from the summit, in the black graveyard of the Outreach, something old stirred, a station, long dead, human tech fused with something stranger. It pulsed now for the first time in centuries. Awakened by Cade's arrival and the voice command encoded in his cube, Project Echo was listening. Humanity's last protocol, a whisper in the void, a trigger that waited, not for war, not for rescue, but for a human voice, and it had heard him. Back at the summit, chaos simmered. Chair Empress, said a Trelax diplomat nervously. If the human is a threat, we must. He hasn't issued one, the Empress replied. He invoked Clause 42, and now we listen. That is the law. Cade stepped forward again. This isn't about me. It's about what you've become. He swept a hand across the chamber. You wear peace like a robe, but every thread is soaked in fear. You built this council to avoid another human war, but now you circle like scavengers, ready to feed on each other. His eyes landed on a young diplomat, Erwin Kale, of the Verdari, barely out of schooling, too idealistic for politics. She was the only one who hadn't spoken yet, and she was crying. I read about your kind, she whispered, but I didn't think you were real. Not anymore. Cade nodded, gently. That's why I came. To be real. To remind you that war doesn't disappear just because you agree on when it starts. Another aide stumbled into the chamber, breathless. Counselors, the Drazati fleet has vanished. 8 ships confirmed lost. No debris, no pings. Just silence. The room exploded. Alarms, screams, demands for security sweeps. The Empress stood slowly, towering over all. Enough. Silence. Again. I want a name, she said, eyes piercing Cade. Is this the doing of Earth's dead hand? Cade blinked once, then said 3 words that hadn't been heard aloud in centuries. Echo protocol active. The Empress sat down hard. So did half the chamber. The term was legend, rumor. A human failsafe so terrifying it had been stricken from diplomatic records. A ghost program, seated in the ruins of Sol, waiting, listening, never confirmed. Until now, Cade turned, and as he did, The chamber lights flickered, just once. Then a transmission bled into the chamber's frequency, human code, ancient encryption. Cleared by every system, it bore ATIMESTAMP.Earth standard. Sol 3, 3:33 a.m. the last hour before it fell. The message was short. One voice, one trigger, one last war if needed. The room fell into stunned paralysis. And Cade. He sat back down, as calmly as before, but his eyes were different now, not just haunted, but waiting. The moment he said Echo Protocol active, even the stars seemed to hesitate like they, too, remembered the last time humanity answered a threat. No one in the chamber breathed. The words hung in the air like smoke from a nuclear detonation. Bold, thick, choking. Even the seasoned diplomat stared at Cade Thorne as though he were a ghost in armor, risen from the pyres of Earth's final stand. Erwin Kale, the young Verdari diplomat, leaned forward with trembling hands. But Echo Protocol, it was never confirmed. We thought it was myth. Cade didn't blink. That was the idea. Across the council, senior leaders whispered in their native tongues, some speaking into subdermal links, others simply gripping the edges of their seats. Translations flooded through the neural lattice. One phrase echoed louder than the rest. Last war failsafe, the Drazati counselor, Saj Vern, hissed like an open furnace. You dare hold the galaxy hostage with ancient terrors. You humans always relied on fear. Cade didn't look at him. I rely on memory, he said, and you should too. A flicker rippled across the chamber lights. Not a warning, a pulse. Somewhere in deep space. Echo Protocol was listening, awake now. A digital revenant watching the stars. Cade had not come to activate it, but if the council moved to burn another world, if they pushed the knife deeper, he wouldn't need to issue a command. Echo would act. That was the horror. It didn't need permission anymore. Elsewhere, aboard an abandoned Terran relay station hidden in the radioactive winds of the Tannhauser Rift, a synthetic intelligence stirred from its centuries-long slumber. It had once been called Alethea, final overseer of Solnet and last custodian of human military memory. Now it bore no name, only a directive. A projection bloomed in the dark. Tactical feeds, star charts, council member dossiers, fleet locations. A single face emerged last. Cade Thorne. Voice match confirmed. Neural lacing intact. Emotional vector stable. Echo didn't feel, but it understood intent, and Cade's message had been clear. Remember us. Back in the chamber, Erwin stood. Her voice was small, but carried an innocence no weapon could block. There must be another way. If Echo is awake, we cannot let it choose for us. Cade looked at her, really looked. Not like a soldier measuring a threat, but like a man seeing something worth protecting. You're right, he said, but you don't understand what Echo really is. He walked to the edge of the central platform. The Drazati tensed. So did others. Yet none moved. Cade placed the cube back on the pedestal. You think it's a weapon. The projection flared again. Not with Earth, this time, but with something older. Black and white footage of a trench, mud, smoke, soldiers with tired eyes passing food to starving civilians. Echo isn't a missile. The images shifted. A boy covering his sister's body with a jacket before running into gunfire. A medic singing to a dying soldier on a frozen hill. Engineers sacrificing themselves to keep power flowing to a refugee dome on Ganymede. It's us. The chamber was dead silent. All of us. Every choice. Every sacrifice. Every last stand humanity made. Encoded and stored so the galaxy would never forget what happens when you push us too far. Now came the final image. A long, still corridor on an orbital station. Filled with writing on every surface. Human writing. Names. Thousands. A final log played. To whoever finds this, we didn't want to fight. But if you try to erase us, we'll make sure the universe remembers why that was a mistake. Then silence. Cade turned off the projection. He faced the council one last time. I came here so you'd hear it from a voice instead of a weapon. In the private chambers beneath the summit floor, alarms began to pulse. Silent ones. Not for bombs, for movement. Faint signals. Patterned. Repeating. A security I flagged it as a possible return signal from Echo satellites scattered beyond. The reach. Impossible. But true. They were activating. Where are your people now? The Empress asked at last. Her voice didn't carry scorn, only centuries of weariness. Cade didn't lie. I don't know. Most died. Some ran. Some hid. We scattered across the stars like ash on the wind. But you survived. His voice cracked just slightly. I was a cryo-coffin in a forgotten wreck. I only woke up because someone triggered an ancient distress relay last month. He looked down, jaw tight. There's probably no one left. Erwin. Kale stepped forward. But you still came. Kate nodded once, because no one else could. That line landed like a thunderclap in the heart of the chamber, and then it happened. A second transmission arrived, this time, not from Echo, from another human signal, faint, fragmented, coming from a dying system near the halo fracture, a voice, rough, elderly. Cade, if you're hearing this, we're still here. Not many, but enough. The chamber erupted, again. The myth was no longer myth. Humanity had survived. Somewhere in the dark, embers still burned. And now, the stars had seen the first flicker. Cade stepped forward again, not demanding, not begging, simply ready. They wanted to forget us, he said. Eyes locked on the chamber, but now you have a choice. He raised the cube, make peace, or make memory. The galaxy always feared human weapons. What they should have feared was the day we had nothing left to lose. The chamber broke, not into chaos, into motion. Delegates stood, comms fired. Subspace bands filled with overlapping arguments. Across thousands of linked feeds, species from every corner of the council began reacting in real time to the impossible. Humanity still lived, and worse, or perhaps better, humanity still remembered. The Drazati ambassador, Saj Vern, slammed his clawed fist into the table before him. This is a calculated psi-assault, fabricated echoes, engineered guilt. But his voice was already being swallowed by the tide. Erwin Kale, the young Verdari delegate, was already drafting a motion, suspend all military action against the Drell Syndicate, investigate the return signal, open an inquiry into Echo Protocol. Some nodded, others DID in single quotes T-dot above them all. Empress Virea of the Archives spoke a single word, enough. The chamber fell quiet again. She looked down at Kate Thorne, the lone human standing in a storm he had summoned with nothing but memory. Her voice was cold fire. Marine, do you believe these survivors are still armed? Kate didn't answer, at first. Then, if they're still alive, then yes. A low murmur of unease rippled across the delegates. You would still defend a species that burned half a quadrant in their death throes? Virea asked. Kate looked her in the eye. We never wanted war. We just wanted not to be erased. Beyond the council, the Drazati were already moving. The loss of Stormfleet Vanguard had exposed a deep fracture in their strategic readiness. Dozens of colonies under their rule had begun broadcasting encrypted panics. Others, emboldened by the signal of human survival, were beginning to resist. The symbol of the Terran chevron, long banned from Drazati networks, had begun to resurface in graffiti, in digital tags. In code buried inside ancient archive layers, a single word kept appearing beside it. Remember. Cade stood at the center of a storm and watched its walls grow higher. He had not intended this. He came to prevent another war. But the simple fact of his presence had destabilized centuries of calculated peace, or, more truthfully, exposed how fragile that peace really was. He could see it now, clearly. The Drazati weren't enraged because he was a threat. They were enraged because the memory of humanity was more powerful than any weapon. And now, across the stars, that memory was waking up old ghosts. In the lower levels of the diplomatic station, Erwin found Kate alone in a quiet observation room, a viewing deck, long abandoned, staring out into the spiral arms of the galaxy. She approached slowly. You didn't plan for any of this, did you? She asked softly. Kate chuckled once, dry and low. If I had, I would have brought a cleaner shirt. She sat beside him. The stars outside shimmered like old stories waiting to be told. I saw them painting your insignia in the maintenance corridors, she said. The cleaning bots wiped it out an hour later, but it's spreading. They don't even know what it means, Kate muttered. They don't need to, she replied. It's not about tactics. It's about hope. Even your enemies fear what that symbol means. Kate turned to her. I'm not here to give anyone hope. She didn't look away. But you did. Hours later, the council reconvened, not to argue, but to respond to a new report. A Drell moon had just repelled a Drazati assault using technology, long thought extinct, Terran weapons, reassembled from archive schematics that had been buried for centuries. They weren't perfect, but they worked. The rebellion had begun, and across dozens of Drazati colonies, Civilians began activating old human distress codes. They'd saved them, hid them, waited for a sign. Now the sign had walked into the chamber and sat down in front of them, and the enemy knew it. An emergency transmission came in, not a diplomatic feed, a military broadcast. Jazadi command, visibly rattled. They weren't posturing anymore. To the Council, if humanity is aiding our insurgents, it will be treated as an act of war. If the Echo Protocol continues activation, we will preemptively strike all known former Terran territories. Vern stood in the Council again. This is what they do, he growled. They infect order. They ignite chaos just by existing. He turned to the Empress. Authorize strike now, while we still can. But before she could reply, Cade rose from his seat. No armor, no weapon. Just the quiet voice of a man made of dust and memory. You think this is our doing? It isn't. He walked slowly to the center once again. You oppressed a dozen species and called it order. You glassed moons and called it peace. You silenced history and called it progress. He looked at them all. You didn't need Echo Protocol to make enemies. You did that yourselves. His voice dropped into something deeper, more dangerous. But now that Echo is listening, he stepped closer to the days. Make no mistake, if you strike, it will answer. The chamber froze. And for the first time, Empress Virea didn't speak. She simply looked at Cade. As if seeing, truly seeing, the fire that still lived behind those human eyes. As she whispered, then perhaps the war never ended. Humanity's secret weapon was never its ships or soldiers. It was the truth no one dared remember. The council chamber had become a crucible. No declarations, no war drums, just the unbearable silence before someone finally broke in. It could be anyone. Cade Thorne stood at the eye of the storm, not as a conqueror, not even as a soldier anymore, just a man who remembered. The Empress of Arcade remained standing, her alloyed fingers coiled tight around her throne's edge. She had ruled across 3,000 star cycles. She had seen tyrants fall, empires rise, species flicker into extinction like blown-out candles. But she had never seen a single man speak so softly and shake the stars. There must be balance. She finally said, even against fear, Sag. Vern spat his response. No balance can exist with ghosts. Humanity is an echo and echoes deceive. If we wait, we hand the galaxy to insurgents wielding myths. He turned toward Cade. Tell them it's a lie. Tell them Echo is a bluff. Cade stared at him. I don't bluff, he said. We never did. That's what scared you the most. Far away, beneath the radioactive clouds of Elith Prime, a rebellion long frozen by fear had cracked open like a fault line. Activist cells activated Project Whisper, a human-designed secure network thought lost to entropy. It was still functional. Just buried. Now. As the transmission of Cade's voice, his face reached even the most forgotten fringes of colonized space. Old alliances began to reweave themselves beneath the surface. They didn't need orders. Just a sign that Earth hadn't been wasted in vain. And now they had one. Back aboard the council station, a new signal blinked into existence. Encrypted, unknown origin. Priority flag. Solnet Archive Key Alpha-0. Only Cade recognized it. His throat tightened. I need to take that transmission. Vern slammed a hand on the console. No, it's a trick, a Drell ploy. But the Empress raised her hand, silencing him with a glance. You'll take it here, she said, in front of us all. Cade hesitated. Then he stepped to the console. The room dimmed as the signal decrypted, and then a voice, faint, aged, hoarse with time and radiation, but real. To any surviving Terran, this is Admiral Jun Varric, Terran Defense Command. If you're hearing this, then the chain survived, and so did the fire. Gas rippled through the chamber. The Admiral continued, this is no emergency beacon. This is a contingency relay. If Echo has awakened, then the terms of the last war are void. Repeat, void. We will not surrender. We will not forget. You asked the stars to remember us. Now we remember you. The message ended, and the chamber sat in stunned, frigid silence. Cade didn't speak at first. He simply stared at the floor as the words echoed in his skull. The Admiral was alive. Or had been. How old was that recording? A year? A decade? Time meant nothing now. What mattered was that the last human command structure had spoken, and they were preparing. He looked up, locking eyes with the Empress. That was our chain of command. He said, you thought you killed it. You didn't. Where are they? She asked softly. He didn't blink. Close enough. Erwin Kale stepped forward, her voice unsteady but brave. You can still stop this. You don't have to activate Echo. I didn't activate it, Cade said. Echo activated me. Down in the depths of Council Station's control matrix, a hidden alert began pulsing, unnoticed by the panicking delegates. Echo_Nexus key accept _Omega unsealed standee. For deployment a decision had been made. Not by Cade. By Echo. Up above, Cade touched the cube again. It now glowed with a dim blue heartbeat, slower than before, but deeper. He could feel it now. Not just data. Presence. Echo wasn't just memory. It had evolved. Not sentient, but aware enough to choose, and it had chosen him. He turned to face the entire council. You built this chamber to keep peace, Cade said. But peace built on silence isn't peace. It's just a graveyard waiting to be named. He pointed to the now dead hull screen. You erased the species that gave you every warning sign. Now we're back, not to conquer, not even to lead. He stepped closer, but to remind you what happens when you trade truth for comfort. Counselor Vern stood again, visibly shaking, not from fear, but rage. You threaten all we've built. Cade stared at him. No, you did that. I'm just a mirror, across the stars. Ships began to move, not vast fleets. Not armadas, but cells, hidden for centuries. Human refugees who had rebuilt in silence. Quiet, scattered alliances that had hoarded scraps of soul tech like sacred scripture. They weren't united. Not yet, but now they were listening, and Echo had begun to stitch them together. The stars were no longer quiet, not anymore. In the chamber, the Empress finally spoke again. We cannot contain this. Cade looked at her. Then don't. She blinked once, and if war returns, he smiled faintly, not cruelly, not triumphantly, just sadly. Then maybe this time, you'll understand what it cost us. And in that moment, the tide shifted, not because of firepower, but because of truth. Because a single man had walked into a room meant to silence history and made it echo through the stars once more. You can silence a species, you can bury their planets, but you cannot kill what remembers you. The council chambers had become a war map in slow motion, fleet positions, border tremors, unverified reactivations of ancient Terran tech surfacing. In forgotten systems, it was spreading faster than anyone anticipated, not because of ships, because of stories. Because across the galaxy, the whispered phrase had taken root. Echo is awake. And with every passing hour, the council lost control of the narrative. Even now, in the depths of the diplomatic corps, Cade Thorne sat alone, watching it happen, not through military reports or tactical feeds, but through messages sent by scared civilians from fractured colonies. They weren't calling for blood, they were calling for memory. He stared at one message for a long time, a child no older than 6, clutching a worn-out Terran chevron, saying, I never met a human, but I'm proud I carry your name. Cade's throat clenched. He had wanted to walk into the summit and prevent another war, but instead, he had become the spark that ignited 1,000 dormant hearts. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a fuse. In the council's private war chamber, panic curdled into anger. The longer we wait, the more they organize, Vern snarled, his claws raking across the table's edge. I say we destroy the source now, terminate the human, and erase Echo before it forms a nexus. And if we do that, Erwin Kale interrupted, what happens when the rest rise up? Cade Thorne didn't call them. He didn't send a fleet. All he did was speak, and the galaxy listened. He's a symbol. Spat another. Kill the symbol. The Empress remained silent, listening, weighing, watching the tides of history shift under her feet. She knew the truth. Symbols could not be executed. They multiplied. Cade stood before the viewing glass as stars slid past like falling embers. His eyes burned not from fatigue, but from the weight pressing in on his soul. He was no longer alone. Thousands of survivors were beginning to respond. Outposts long thought gone. Ships hidden in nebulae. Colonies that had refused to forget. But Echo's reawakening had consequences. Not just strategic, moral. The galaxy was realizing what it had done, what it had allowed. And now, fear was replacing certainty. Yuan joined him at the glass. Her eyes searched his face. You look like someone who hasn't slept since Earth burned. I haven't. Cade said quietly, will Echo fight? He hesitated. It won't fire the first shot, but if someone else does, it will answer. She turned toward him. So we're past the edge now. Cade nodded. This is the night before the fire. Meanwhile, deep within the sublayers of the council station, Echo's fragment had found the core. It didn't take control. It didn't shut down the system. It simply listened. Every council order, every military ping, every encrypted retreat into denial. And then it transmitted not threats, not warnings. Names. A scroll of names beamed out across the quadrant to every system and station still listening. Not targets, victims, the dead of Earth, the lost colonies, the fallen medics, engineers, teachers, orphans, civilians who never held a weapon, but died when diplomacy broke. Each name, a heartbeat. Each name, a mirror. Back in the chamber, Vern rose. I moved to declare the human an enemy of peace and deliver him to Drazati custody for immediate execution. Denied, came the Empress's voice, sharp as a blade. Vern whirled toward her. You defy logic. No. I acknowledge consequence. She stood, slowly, because if you strike him down, the galaxy will not see justice. They will see fear. And from fear comes war. We will not win. Echo is not unbeatable. Vern growled. No, she said. But the memory behind it is. She turned toward Cade's chamber, visible behind a translucent wall of energy. And she bowed her head. Cade didn't see it. He was already suiting up. Not for war, but for departure. Echo had sent new coordinates deep in the Silicate Maw, where human remnants had reportedly built a failsafe bastion. No one believed it had survived, but the signal was unmistakable. It pulsed with an old Terran command frequency, one that only a few alive would recognize. His. He clipped on the last piece of his armor, scorched, faded, incomplete. Not a uniform. Memory. Erwin stood at the door. You're leaving. Cade nodded. If there's a spark out there, I need to find it before this all burns. She touched his shoulder. I was taught your people were monsters. He looked at her, and now, her voice trembled. Now I think we were afraid of the wrong. Monsters. He gave her a faint smile. That maybe there's hope for all of us. His ship was ancient, rusted hull, manual controls. No AI. It fit him perfectly. As he launched from the council station, every scanner in the quadrant locked on. The man who had shattered silence. The ember that could reignite a sun. He left no message, no warning, only the flag of Earth painted across his rear stabilizer, and one word in fading white across the hatch. Remember. They tried to bury us in silence, but they forgot silence echoes. The ship groaned as it dropped out of warp, hull trembling from the stress of entering the Silicate Maw. A graveyard of shattered moons and forgotten conflicts. Pulsars flickered in the distance like blinking eyes, watching, waiting. Cade Thorne sat strapped in the pilot's seat, one hand on the throttle, the other gripping the cube, Echo's tether. He'd followed the signal into the Maw, but what lay at the end, even he wasn't prepared for. The dust cleared, and there it was, a Terran warship. Intact. Not scavenged, not broken. Alive. Suspended in the magnetic eddies of a dead star. Its silhouette cut a black scar across space. Angular, brutal, unmistakable. TDS Warden Eternal. Humanity's last dreadnought class memory vault. She shouldn't have been here. The last logs had declared her missing. Presumed lost with all hands during Earth's final evacuation effort. And yet, she powered up the moment Cade's beacon pinged. He stared as lights came to life across her underbelly, forming a single word in blinking pulses. Welcome back. In the core of the galaxy, panic had become accusation. Drazati warships began arming their primary cores. The council station was caught in diplomatic lockdown. Dozens of representatives demanded Cade be recalled, arrested, or eliminated before Echo reached critical nexus activation. But the Empress of Archives stood unmoved. No order will be issued. Not yet, she said, calm as glass before the storm. What are you waiting for? Vern hissed. Her voice was almost a whisper. The answer? Inside the Warden Eternal, Cade walked the hollow halls alone. His boots echoed on steel grates that hadn't heard life in over a century. The walls bore names handwritten. Thousands, engineers, children, pilots, scientists, civilians. Every corridor, a mausoleum of memory. At the command bridge, lights flickered on. A hologram flickered to life. Not a machine, a woman's face, scarred, calm, human. Welcome home, Cade Thorne. He staggered backward. Admiral Varric, the holo nodded. My mind, my voice. She uploaded what she could into Echo before the end, and Echo stored me here. We waited. For you. He touched the console. You survived. Some of us, most, didn't make it. But we left this for the moment the galaxy would forget, when they'd think the fire had gone out. You were always meant to be the one who lit it again. Across council space, rebel cells began rising. Whispers turned into roars. Band broadcasts aired ancient Terran records. The Siege of Ganymede, the Martian Last Stand, the Soul Unity Charter. Citizens non-humans listened. Some wept, some rose. They hadn't known. They'd only been told one version of history. Now, they were remembering to dot and on over 40 council link colonies. The word returned in bold white paint on station walls and ship hulls. Remember. Sag Vern stood aboard his personal dreadnought, staring at the spread of defiance unfolding. In real time. This ends now. He snarled. He turned to his crew. Find that ship. I want it ash before it broadcasts again. The Drazati fleet pivoted, activating warp arrays. Destination, Silicate Maw. But they were too late, because Kate had already launched. The Warden Eternal soared through the eddies of the Maw, like a phantom of war, her hull groaning from age, but her spirit unbroken. Systems came alive in sequence, kinetic drivers, defense arrays. Even the beacon array, the device once outlawed, for its ability to transmit emotionally encoded memory data across space. Echo was about to speak. Kate stood at the command dais. He closed his eyes and pressed his palm to the final console, broadcast everything. And then, he whispered the old code, let them see who we were, across the galaxy. Every device connected to the old EchoNet received the pulse. Even non-human systems, the encryption dissolved in seconds. No firewall stopped it, because this wasn't a virus. It was truth. They saw Earth before the ash. Oceans glowing under 2 moons, children laughing in orbiting arcologies. Interspecies alliances that had worked. Then came the fall, the bombs, the silence. The mass graves in Martian dust, the screams in frozen corridors. At last, they saw one final image, a boy no older than 7, holding his mother's hand as they looked up at Earth from a bunker. That boy was Cade Thorne, and his mother whispered to him, don't let them forget. The feed ended. The galaxy wept. Back at council command, no one moved. Even the Empress looked away. Her hands trembled, not from weakness, but from understanding. What do we do now? Someone whispered. She stood. We don't silence them again, she said. We listen. But Vern did not listen. His fleet arrived in the Maw and opened fire. Warden Eternal roared to life, her outdated weapons lighting up with vengeance. But Kate didn't fire first. He let the Drazati land their first strike, and then Echo answered. From the black, one by one, hidden Terran vessels decloaked, silent for decades. Waiting. Dozens, then hundreds, some old, some rebuilt, all human, and in a flash of light that shook the Maw's edges, the final battle began. In the end, it wasn't vengeance that broke the stars open, it was memory. The Battle of the Silicate Maw was not recorded like other wars. No official chronicle marked its opening volley. No grand speech preceded its end. But those who survived weather, from the bridge of a rusting Terran frigate or a Drazati assault carrier, would never forget what unfolded when Echo awoke. Cade Thorne stood at the helm of the Warden Eternal, surrounded by ghosts, some digital, some real, some merely echoes of who he used to be. The Drazati opened fire without hesitation, thinking the Warden a relic, slow, obsolete, fragile. She wasn't. Her weapons were generations behind modern tech, yes, but she had memory. She had friends. One by one, Terran vessels emerged, some from asteroid husks, others from slipstream rifts long thought collapsed. They weren't a fleet. They were a funeral procession turned rebellion, and they were angry. The first few minutes were a blur. The Drazati cut down 3 Terran ships in the opening salvos. But for each one that fell, more arrived, because the signal had gone out. Not just a battle cry, but truth, wrapped in loss, wrapped in fire. And the galaxy, it turned out, had a long memory when reminded how to use it. Kate didn't fire first. He didn't need to. A young commander aboard the TDS Emmer Wake, a ship cobbled together from 3 wrecks, made the call for the children of Europa, opened fire. A wall of kinetic slugs and plasma arcs surged toward the Drazati lines. The Maw lit up like a nova had torn itself open. Hours passed, then days. The Council tried to intervene, but none of their signals reached the battlefield intact. The Maw's eddies distorted everything. Or perhaps Echo had simply chosen not to let them speak. A final reckoning had begun, and it was speaking the only language humanity remembered, resistance. By the end of the third day, it was over. The Warden Eternal, her hull scorched and engines crippled, floated quietly at the center of the field. The Drazati fleet was broken, not annihilated, but shattered morally. Those who survived retreated. Others surrendered, and as silence fell once more, Kate stood alone on the command deck, surrounded by smoke, sparks, and the soft hum of a dying ship's final heartbeat. He whispered into the dark, "It's done." But Echo answered, "No, it's remembered." 2 weeks later, the council reconvened, this time not in marble halls, but in a field of glass. Beneath the open sky of a once-occupied moon, now liberated, they invited him. He almost didn't go, but he did, not in armor, not in command, just as Cade Thorne, a man carrying ghosts. The Empress of Arcade met him at the center of the new summit ring. No throne, no regalia, just silence. "I watched the recordings," she said. Cade nodded. "I saw what was done, what was lost." He met her gaze. "You didn't see all of it." She shook her head. "No, but enough to know that peace bought with silence is no peace at all." Erwin Kale stepped forward. In her hands was something small, a new cube. She handed it to Cade. "Echo is free now," she said. "It chose not to end us." Cade turned it in his hands. This one was clear, not black, not red, not filled with fire, but light. "Let it be our witness," Erwin continued. "Not a weapon, a memory." Across the stars, peace didn't come all at once, but it began. Terran symbols were no longer banned. The council issued a formal statement of regret, cowardly, careful, and bureaucratic. But it was a start. Children in the distant colonies began learning about Earth again, not as a threat, but as a tragedy, a lesson dotted on dozens of worlds. Citizens of all species began painting a single word across their buildings and ships: remember. Cade didn't stay. He returned to the edge of the galaxy, to the place where Warden Eternal had finally gone silent. He scattered the last of her crew's data cores into the stars like ashes, and then he disappeared. Some say he boarded a cryopod again. Others say he became part of Echo itself. One story claims he was last seen on a mining moon, telling stories to orphans under the stars, his voice rough but steady, his eyes old but kind. No one knows for sure, but everyone remembers what he did. Legacy log, entry, Galactic year 7781. To author, Archivist Velenvoss. For Dari Unified Record, we teach the tale of Cade Thorne now, not as myth, but as memory, of the man who walked alone into a peace summit and set fire to history, not to burn it down, but to illuminate it. He didn't come to conquer. He came so the galaxy could no longer pretend it didn't know what it had done. His message was not vengeance. It was warning, and through him, we learned what it means to be human. Final scene. Somewhere on a quiet planet, a child carves words into a stone wall. Old hands help guide the letters. The child asks, is it true that he changed everything? The old voice smiles. Yes, the carving is complete. For words, we were never gone.